Unteachables, Chapter 10. Kiana Rubini. Bad news comes from Utah. Lightning strikes the equipment trailer on my mom's movie set, so filming has to stop for a couple of weeks. Can't I come home while you're waiting to start filming again? I asked Mom during a Skype call. That won't work, she says. What about school? You just started at Greenwich. We can't pull you out and then enroll you again a few weeks later. That would be too disruptive. I almost screamed. There's nothing to disrupt. Geez Louise, never officially registered me. I'm not even in a real class. But I keep quiet. If Mom finds out, she'll call Dad immediately. Then I'd probably end up registered for 8 real classes with real teachers, homework, and assignments. My life in Greenwich isn't great, but at least it's manageable. I'm only here for a short time, just a little longer than I expected. 2 more weeks with Dad and Step Monster. 2 more weeks of Chauncey's barking, coughing, and messes. 2 more weeks with the Unteachables. I decide I can survive it. Why doesn't Kiana tell her mother the truth about school? Speaking of school, Mom says, how are you fitting in? I went there years ago when it was still called Greenwich High. Great, I answer. I already got picked for a special program. Mom smiles immediately. She loves the idea of me being special. It's called SCS8, I continue. It's really hard to get into. The teacher is fantastic. He lets us work independently. Mr. Kermit believes... Kermit? Mom interrupts. You mean the teacher involved in the cheating scandal? I stare at her. Cheating scandal? Mom thinks for a moment. This was a long time ago, back in the early 90s. I don't remember all the details, but everyone in town was talking about it. I'm surprised he's still teaching. Now I'm interested. Mr. Kermit has a secret past. What exactly happened? I ask. I don't remember, Mom says. I just know it was serious. Then she offers to call the school and find out more. No, I say quickly. Mr. Kermit is a great teacher now. Whatever happened was a long time ago. Mom still seems worried, but finally she drops the subject. After the call ends, I can't stop thinking. Suddenly, everything makes sense. Maybe Mr. Kermit teaches the Unteachables because of whatever happened years ago. Perhaps the school still punishes him by assigning him the students nobody else wants. SCS8 isn't the only place where rejected students end up. Maybe rejected teachers end up there too. Still, I don't think badly of Mr. Kermit. He stood up for our class when Mrs. Vargas criticized us. He also fought to let Barnstorm stay on the football team. He may not be the world's greatest teacher, but I'm convinced he's one of the good guys. The next morning, I'm almost eager to go to school. Unfortunately, Mr. Kermit isn't there. Instead, we have a substitute teacher named Mrs. Landsman. She's much older than Mr. Kermit. Within minutes, Rahim sketches her as a zombie rising from the grave. The drawing gets passed around the room in paper airplanes. Dawn of the Dead, Mateo whispers when he sees it. The nickname spreads instantly. From then on, she's simply Dawn. Dawn is grumpy, but there's a difference between her and Mr. Kermit. Mr. Kermit complains because that's just his personality. We never take it personally. Dawn, however, seems angry at us. She's lecturing about the Battle of Gettysburg when I hear a strange humming sound. At first I think something is wrong with the school building. Then I realize the noise is coming from Aldo. His face is bright red as he hums loudly. Hum. A second hum begins behind me. Barnstorm is doing it too, clearly enjoying himself. Soon, Elaine joins in with an even deeper hum. I decide to participate. Before long, the entire class is humming at different pitches. The room vibrates. Dawn looks alarmed and calls for the custodian. As soon as Mr. Carstairs enters, everyone stops. It was happening a second ago, Dawn insists. I think there's something wrong with the wiring. Mr. Carstairs gives us a knowing look. It's the students, he says. They do this to every substitute. Dawn is furious, but there isn't much she can do except yell. She does plenty of that. We continue our rebellion throughout the class. Students repeatedly drop textbooks on the floor. Barnstorm drums with his crutches. Elaine pretends to sleep. Mateo speaks to Dawn in Dothraki and writes in Elvish runes. Then Dawn makes a shocking announcement. Take out your math books. The class stares at her. What math books? Barnstorm asks. Surely you have math books, she says impatiently. How do you study math? We use worksheets, Mateo explains. Dawn looks even more frustrated. For the first time, I realize how unusual our class really is. Most classes do have textbooks, assignments, and regular lessons. SCS8 mostly has worksheets, random activities, and long periods where nobody does very much. Dawn is trying to run the room like a normal classroom, but SCS8 isn't normal. The students aren't used to following directions, and they certainly aren't used to substitutes expecting real work. Without Mr. Kermit there, the class quickly falls apart. Everyone seems determined to make the substitute day as difficult as possible. Watching the chaos, I understand something important. Even though Mr. Kermit doesn't act like a typical teacher, somehow he keeps this unusual group together. Maybe that's harder than teaching from a textbook. What worksheets? Mrs. Lansman demanded. I don't see any worksheets. There should be lesson plans. Of course there should be lesson plans, if we had a normal teacher. But Dawn of the Dead didn't know Mr. Kermit. Maybe she thought we had hidden everything before she arrived. Whatever she believed, she became angrier by the minute. Since she couldn't find any plans, she grabbed a reading passage from a random language arts book and asked Parker to read it aloud. That was a mistake. Parker slowly sounded out the first word. Then he struggled with the second. Because we had been giving Mrs. Lansman trouble all day, she assumed Parker was pretending. She wasn't willing to believe that Parker truly had difficulty reading. That's enough, she snapped. Go to the principal's office. Only a minute after Parker left, we heard the familiar sound of his old pickup truck starting up and speeding away from the parking lot. You know, he wasn't faking, I told Mrs. Lansman. He has a reading problem, and he's really sensitive about it. At that moment, Miss Fountain appeared and invited everyone to another circle time session. Circle time, Mrs. Lansman said angrily. These students are much too old for circle time, and so are yours. Miss Fountain looked ready to explain the benefits of positive reinforcement, but one look at Mrs. Lansman's face changed her mind. She quickly returned to her own classroom. When the final bell rang at 3:30, Mrs. Lansman stood in front of us with a disappointed expression. "You are the most disrespectful class I have ever taught," she announced. "You should all be ashamed of yourselves. My son attended this school, and he grew up to become a successful journalist. He would be shocked to see how students behave here now." Then she added, "I don't believe you would ever act this way for Mr. Kermit." As the sound of her heels faded down the hallway, an unusual silence filled room 117. "Well, maybe Mr. Kermit isn't a cranky old bag like she is," Aldo muttered after she was safely out of hearing range. Rahim frowned thoughtfully. "The strange thing is she's right. We wouldn't act like that for Ribbit. I wonder why." I knew the answer. Mr. Kermit might ignore us most of the time, but he still treated us as his class. He defended us when other teachers criticized us. He fought for Barnstorm when he needed support in his own unusual way. He cared about us. And maybe, in our own unusual way, we were beginning to care about him too. The next morning, Mr. Kermit walked into 117 and saw something he had never seen before. All 7 of us were sitting quietly at our desks with our hands folded and our eyes facing forward. No one was talking. No paper airplanes were flying. Everyone looked nervous. After what had happened the day before, we expected punishment. Mr. Kermit put down his coffee and newspaper and looked around the room. "What?" he asked. Nobody answered. He handed out the day's worksheet. The moment the papers touched our desks, every student immediately started working. Mr. Kermit stared at us with confusion. This was another first. Usually, at least half the class was talking, joking, or causing trouble. After a moment, he simply shrugged and returned to his desk to work on his crossword puzzle. I began working on the worksheet, which focused on current events. Then the classroom intercom suddenly buzzed. "Mr. Kermit," the secretary said, "Principal Vargas is available this morning if you'd like to discuss Mrs. Lansman's report about your students." The entire room froze. If Mrs. Lansman had written a report, it could not have been good. No," Mr. Kermit replied calmly. "Thanks anyway." Mr. Kermit's response surprised all of us. Was he so disconnected that he didn't realize how badly we had behaved? Or had he simply ignored the report, the same way he seemed to ignore everything else? Whatever the reason, everyone relaxed. For the first time, I wondered if Mr. Kermit ignored our assignments because students in SCS 8 rarely turned in work worth reading. That was something I could change. I could write well. The worksheet included an essay question about public transportation, buses, trains, and subways. Since I grew up in Los Angeles, I had strong opinions about transportation. LA traffic is terrible, and poor public transportation only makes pollution worse. Soon, I had filled the entire page and still had more to say. I walked to Mr. Kermit's desk. He had pushed aside his crossword puzzle and was reading a paper from the office. I noticed the title at the top, Report of Substitute Teacher. I wondered if he was angry. "Are you really mad at us?" I asked quietly. He looked surprised by the question. "There are 2 sides to every story," he finally said. Then he dropped the report into the trash can. "Did you need something?" he asked. "Can I have more paper?" I said. Mr. Kermit looked confused. "What for?" he asked. "My essay," I explained. "I ran out of room." That surprised everyone in SCS 8. Usually students did too little work, not too much. Mr. Kermit returned to his crossword puzzle. So, can I have more paper? I asked again. Paper? He repeated blankly. Yes. He stood up and looked around the room as though he had never seen paper before. Finally, he led me to a storage closet and opened the door. The closet was empty except for cobwebs. Mr. Kermit looked helpless. Maybe Miss Fountain has some extra paper, I suggested. I'm on it, Parker shouted. He ran toward the door so quickly that he knocked over his desk, tripped, and crashed face first onto the floor. Seconds later, he jumped up and raced out anyway. A moment later, we heard Miss Fountain call from the next door. Parker, you're bleeding. He has a driver's license, Barnstorm said. The kid can barely walk. A few minutes later, Parker returned holding bloody paper towels against his nose. He handed me several sheets of lined paper, which were also stained with blood. I eventually wrote 4 full pages for my essay, and I felt proud of it. Even though I wasn't going to stay at Greenwich for long, I didn't want my study habits to disappear completely. When I returned to my real school in California, I wanted to be ready. I carried my essay to Mr. Kermit's desk. He looked at the papers as if I had handed him something dangerous. It's my essay, I explained. I can't wait to hear what you think. Mr. Kermit accepted the pages and placed them on the corner of his desk. Then he immediately returned to his crossword puzzle. Aren't you going to read it? I asked. Of course, he said without looking up. 3 days later, my essay was still sitting on the corner of his desk, exactly where I had left it. He had never touched it. Even Parker's blood stains on the paper had started turning brown. I stared at the essay and wondered if Mr. Kermit had ever intended to read it at all.